Another big news day, a lot to get through. Joining me now is the senior reporter for Sky News, Caroline Marcus. Caroline, welcome to the program. Let's start with what the PM had to say today on the rising cost of living. He said it's his government's top priority as the global economy deteriorates. He signalled that government spending won't rise substantially ahead of the 2025 election. He also recommitted to Tony Burke's industrial relations reform and said there will be further investment in reskilling, technology, innovation and renewables. So more of the same.
Yeah, it would seem that way, Rita. I mean, it might be some comfort to people listening at home that the Prime Minister seems to finally be prioritising cost of living. That is after spending the better part of the year focused entirely on The Voice and trying to get that up. Now he's focused on cost of living. That's going to be a little bit late for many of us. But he has said that is his government's priority now going into the second half of his first term of government. He's also said that he wants to emphasise the importance of reducing inflation, which signals that there won't be this big cash splash before the next election in 2025. And he's vowed to shield Australia from the worst of a deteriorating global economy without resorting to protectionism. Now, he made that speech at the Economic and Social Outlook Conference on the eve of his visit to China on the weekend, and he also defended that in all his international trips. He said this is important because it's going to bolster and stabilise the relationship that we have with China, as well as emphasise the goods that we have here, the exports, and the advantage that we have with those exports.
Now, Caroline, we've got footage of a clash in Bondi today where a man was apparently taking down posters calling for the release of Israeli hostages. Let's have a look.
The hostages aren't here, mate. They're not here. So why are we bringing them up? They're not your family.
What are you here for?
Because we don't need to bring this violence here. Why?
Yeah, but you are. You are. You bring your posters and your flags and everything.
Caroline, we saw similar behaviour at Sydney University where vandals destroyed 9 walls of posters of kidnapped Israeli hostages. They had graffiti drawn on some of the images, others were shredded. What can you tell us about this latest incident in Bondi?
Well, I can confirm that Eastern Suburbs Police Area Command officers are investigating this incident in Bondi, which was reported to them at about 2 p.m. today. They're calling for any members of the public who may have witnessed it to contact police or Crime Stoppers if they've got any information. I've spoken to a couple of witnesses, including one of the organisers of the event. This was an authorised event, an installation to bring awareness to the fact that there are still more than 200 hostages that Hamas kidnapped from Israel during the October 7th massacre that have not come home yet. They had more than 200 towels, pairs of thongs and posters of these hostages put up at Bondi Beach throughout the day. But this afternoon, 2 men who attended this installation were seen ripping down these posters. You could see them with part of the shredded posters in their hands when they're confronted by the organisers and some witnesses, and they said that they didn't want to see the violence brought here. Of course, they were challenged on that, as we heard, by saying that this was a peaceful installation and that these were some of the families of the people who had organised the protest. Of course, we've seen scenes like this throughout the world, and as you mentioned, at the University of Sydney as well. I note that despite desecrating 9 walls of posters of hostages, including babies as young as 9 months old, there were still posters calling for a global intifada in response to these attacks on Israel and of course the defense from Israel in Gaza trying to target Hamas. So those posters were allowed to stay, but the hostages ones were seen as too offensive to some.
And we had protests again in Melbourne in front of the PM's speech, and some of the signs these protesters carried, Caroline, some of the things they said, well, highly disturbing. I think we've got a short grab here. We don't have a short grabber. You can see there's just a hostility there, Caroline, that's not doing their cause any good. It's just making Jewish people feel afraid in their own community, and I don't think they're winning too many over to their cause by attacking the Prime Minister as they did today, attacking media also.
Look, I'm not sure that they care, Rita. I mean, this is this global movement that we've seen, and it's certainly not been very peaceful. And the one today, you know, there were signs that one person was holding a sign that's saying the Anzacs killed my uncle. Well, if they feel that strongly about about Australia and the Anzacs who fought for our freedom, then you'd have to question what they're doing here in the first place.
Exactly.
Assuming these people have citizenship and have been or visas and given the right to live here, how did they form such a hatred for the country that's given them a home? And in other protests, I mean, even the ones that have been reported as being relatively peaceful, there are calls that use the Hamas rally cry from the river to the sea, which calls for the extinction of Israel and thus all the Jews living in it. Those are meant to be the peaceful rallies, and I'm not even getting started on the calls for death to Jews and gas the Jews and intifada's. These are the peaceful ones. So, I mean, I certainly don't think it does anything to help their cause, but there seem to be plenty of useful idiots that are swayed by this kind of Hamas propaganda and Hamas sympathizers and what they're saying, because we've seen a movement of hundreds of thousands across the world ready to take up the cause.